S.I.N Radio. Episode number 17. I'm your host, Mr. Mercy.
I'm your man, Cool Breeze.
And this is S.I.N Radio Cast. In the building, Strength in Numbers Radio. What's going on, man?
Chilling, man. I'm excited. We're on a roll. We everything's moving in the direction that it's supposed to be moving in. And we have a guest today. I'm excited about this. This is going to be our second interview?
Yes,
second interview on our 17th episode of S.I.N Radio Cast. And we're going to get into it. So I'm excited, man. This is going to be a great episode. Great episode.
Nah, absolutely, man. I definitely concur. Yeah, man. Just want to before we even get into it, man, you know how we do, man. Yep. We got to give our shout outs to our peoples out there, all the listeners. Matter of fact, we've been doing a lot of YouTube lately. So, a lot of people on YouTube would tell you, listen, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and also hit that notification bell. I know we haven't been saying that in other shows, but I'm like, we keep missing that part. So that's very important. Just keeps the analytics up, and also gotta put the email out there. Show topics, ideas, anything you want to cuss us out, say we suck. Hit us up at our email, sinradiowave@gmail.com. We also on Instagram at S.I.N Radio Cast, Facebook. And we're also on Twitter. So hit us up there. We follow back. And definitely got to shout out our affiliates over at tttradio.net. Go over there, turntable tendencies, DJing at its finest, man. If you missed that era where DJs were the cornerstone of this thing, you could definitely go over there and check them out, man.
Definitely.
So definitely want to do that.
Definitely shout out to DJ S.I.N and YZ over there at Turntable Tendencies, and definitely a rest in peace shout out to Black Rob and Shock G.
Rest in power, man. Rest in power. Man, that was crazy. Just real quick with this month of April has been one of those months, man. You'll never have seen it in 1,000 years where you lose so many influential figures in the hip hop, genre, right. Just back to back like that. I don't ever recall a month quite like this one.
Yeah, not just even the month. I would say within the year, we've lost a lot of artists. Yeah. And it's. I hope this is not an ongoing trend, and but they have transitioned on, so hopefully, and they're in a better place, and their spirits are, in a better realm. So I just want to make sure that we just give praise and respect, and their music will live on.
Absolutely, man. Shout outs to the family of those brothers, man. Salute, man. Salute. So let's get into it, man. Episode number 17.
Yes.
The show's title today, we're going to be titling after this brother's book. We're going to be calling this show Homeboy in the Pyramids.
Yes.
Homeboy in the Pyramids. And I know the listeners are like, what the hell are y'all talking about? Homeboy in the Pyramids. Well, we're going to get into that throughout this show. And without any further ado, we're going to introduce our guest today. Cool B, it's on you, man.
Okay, we're going to introduce our guest, Mr. Clarke Illmatical.
Hey,
welcome,
peace.
Brother. Welcome.
Peace. Thank you for having me.
No problem, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't sound as good as you two. You guys have voices for radio, so...
Nah, you good, man. You good, man. So what's going on, good brother?
Let's hear it.
Hey, man.
You mentioned, we had some significant people in hip hop passing. So right now, man, it's just been thanks to being alive, surviving the pandemic, and just reflecting on last year this time. People were dying around us. So We're all very fortunate to be at a point where I think a lot of us are going to be able to get vaccinated. If you don't want to get vaccinated, keep, just maintain your health and just move past this. So a lot of us were just fortunate. So I'm fortunate, man. I'm just glad to be here.
Definitely. So for all the people for the first time being introduced to Mr. Clarke Illmatical, could you just give us just a quick background on yourself? What do you do? Because people are like, who's this guy? What's this?
I'm a writer and director. I think people may be familiar with some of my writing. I've been doing a lot of work within martial arts entertainment over the last several years. I've had several significant articles that have gone viral. This summer, I'm releasing my documentary based on those articles. One article I had that went viral a few years ago was called 12 Forgotten Fury, 12 martial artists you haven't heard of. This was about 4 or 5 years ago, and this went viral. This was a viral article, and several other, I published this on the Last Dragon website, and it was picked up, and a lot of websites started covering it. And in the wake of my work, because I initially had a 5-part article in the Amsterdam News.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
5-part article. And in the wake of that, there have been several documentaries about Black martial artists and so forth. So it had a profound effect. And finally, I'm releasing my documentary this year. But I've been doing a lot of work in martial arts entertainment. And people may have seen my other essays and writing online as well.
Wow. Okay, I'm impressed, man.
That's major.
That's major. The Amsterdam is pretty serious.
Yeah. It's serious within the African American or Black news. But when I was trying to publish this work, no one wanted it. Some people were very sensitive about how it was published. And the sports editor for the Amsterdam News, Howie Long, I believe, he knew exactly what I was trying to do, because this is a very sensitive topic, because, it involves, the dynamics between, Asian and, of course, and quote unquote Black Americans. So it's not a finger pointing kind of a contest, but it was, to just identify elements of racism that were there, because the bottom line is that Black men in martial, quote unquote Black men, the African men that are here in the United States, they were dominating sports competition for most of the 60s and 70s.
Right.
And a long story short, what I come to find out that Bruce Lee wasn't a fighter. And so, right. And this is the reason why you don't hear about them.
Wow. Bruce Lee wasn't a fighter. Okay, no. Wait, hold on. You offended a lot of people by saying that.
No, listen, I want to share something with you. I kind of came full circle with this. I don't want it to take, because this could be a whole show in itself.
Right.
But when I first started this project, I had interviewed this real crazy guy. You've probably seen this movie called Bloodsport.
Yes.
And it was about this guy named Frank Dukes. Now, Frank Dukes is full of dog shit, but that's separately, he tried to attach his name to a lot of people, but he was the first person to really put me on to a lot of the Black martial artists.
Right.
And so I called this one brother up. His name was Ronald Duncan. He's acknowledged as the first practitioner of ninjutsu in the United States. He's called the father of American ninjutsu. And he didn't want to tell me at first. He just gave me a little snippet of what happened. And I started, for several months when I was doing this article for the Amsterdam News, working on the article, I come to find out that, there were tournaments in the 60s, except every weekend, in California, Chicago, New York City, almost every other weekend. And Bruce Lee didn't fight at all. He'd go to the tournaments and do push-ups like a motherfucker, or do demonstrations, but he wouldn't fight. And
No, go ahead, finish your statement. I want to say something after that.
So basically what I just come to find out was there was a difference between him and an actual practitioner, and I couldn't figure, and even over the years, I put a lot of clips online, and people Google like Forgotten Fury, they know who I am. And so I couldn't figure out why the hell all these guys talking about how great he was. And basically when he died, they realized that they could attach his name to their resume and make more money.
The brand, pretty much.
Exactly. He's gone. It doesn't hurt anything. Oh yeah, he taught me everything I know. And then, you know, so it it was an interesting experience, and a lot of that work has just coincided with my travels and so forth. And yeah, so people who out there probably know me, they know me through that work, because that I've had more people on YouTube. Like I'll publish some of my videos in relation to travel, and they already had seen my videos about martial arts.
Okay. I have a question, or more of a statement. So it was a while ago where I was on YouTube and I saw something, it was some clips of like some Black martial artists. It may have even been one of your videos where they were talking about Bruce Lee and him coming to the tournament and things like that. And
that's Vic Moore.
Okay.
That started with me.
Okay.
I was the first person to go down there and meet with him.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, this was 2009. And
okay.
No one had, now somebody actually is doing a Vic Moore documentary now.
Right.
And so the thing was, everybody's seen a clip. There's a clip where Bruce Lee is like flashing a punch at some brother's face.
Yeah.
That brother was the international, the first national, not just Black, but the first national champion of the United States.
Oh, wow. Okay, so going back to that statement you just said, because Bruce Lee came to these tournaments, and I guess he wasn't fighting, right?
They were all getting, you know, they were getting fucked up. That was MMA back then.
Right. Okay.
And see, I want to point something else out, and I want to, because like I said, this could be an entire show.
Right.
There was MMA back then. There was like wrestling versus wrestling versus boxing.
Right.
All that shit was going on back then.
But it didn't really have a name for it per se.
It wasn't called MMA, right? And it was really taboo to do like that kind of full contact stuff. But these, like Chuck Norris, he paid his dues, man. Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
Long and short, man, Chuck Norris kind of like, I had a guy tell me, the guy's name was Aaron Banks. And anybody who's in the martial arts world, they know about him. He passed away, but he was a promoter. Chuck Norris turned his back on the martial arts community because he was, when he did that movie with Bruce Lee, he was the national champion.
Yeah.
He was a national champion. And so he went and did this movie with Bruce Lee, gets fucked up in the movie. And then, you know, next thing you know, his movie, his Hollywood career took off after that, but he left the martial arts world behind.
Yeah, a lot of people tend to forget that Chuck Norris was a bad dude, man. He was really about his martial artists, his skills. And
in the documentary, I put this in there, but his son just went off script a few years ago and just basically said, you know, my father would kill Bruce Lee in a fight. Bruce Lee was only 140 pounds, man. You know,
wow.
He wasn't
you're breaking a lot of people's hearts right now.
No, but see,
you messed it up a lot.
I want to say something. You know, I for a while I was like, oh, you know, it's like Bruce Lee and shit. But you know, the bottom line was, he was a martial artist. He doesn't have to be like, you know, you look, okay, this, you know, you got the guys in MMA and like boxing. That's like the pinnacle, or like, you know, Olympic wrestling. That's like the pinnacle of martial arts. But like, you have these other people walking around the streets who are like, you know, 9th degree, 10th degree black belts and specialize in kung fu. They'll fuck you up.
Right.
And I think, you know, Bruce Lee was in that, but there's a difference between a professional fighter and somebody who's not a professional fighter.
It's like almost like a person that's trained, that goes to train for boxing versus a person that actually boxes.
Yeah, it's a difference. Now, don't get it twisted. The guy who trained for boxing, the average person who walks up in the street, you know, I have background in martial arts. I've knocked people out. You know, I broke someone's eye socket before, but I'm not gonna fight Canelo Alvarez.
Right.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a question. So why do you think, like, within the Black community, or just even within the martial arts community, that people only know of, let's say, like Jim Kelly? Because Jim Kelly was a big name.
That's another thing, and that's why the article, when it was released, it was so powerful, because basically a lot of people didn't know that these guys even existed. The guy who's doing the Vic Moore documentary, when he saw it, I think he was in class, and he told somebody, he was like, he never knew that these people existed. I had I was interviewing a martial artist like maybe a year and a half ago, and it was S.I.N. He's like an old school Brooklyn dude. And he said something. He said a lot of parents, when they bring their children to the dojos, they'll say, you know, we didn't know that, you know, quote unquote, black martial artists could be grandmasters.
Oh, wow.
So it's a mental, this is all about a mental trick bag. It's not an attack, because there was racism in martial arts, but at the same time, all these brothers I spoke to, they said they had excellent relationships with Chinese people. And a lot of people said Bruce Lee was cool as fuck. He would come to their dojos and smoke weed with them. And he was a cool guy. And I realized something very powerful that he did. You have to understand, Bruce Lee, I was in Hong Kong and I was interviewing a guy called Bay Logan for Time Out magazine there. And Bay Logan said something very powerful. He said, Bruce Lee is the most recognized actor in the world, not martial arts actor. Most recognized actor, and that was his goal. He didn't want to do full contact. He wanted to make movies, and that's not easy.
Oh no, not at all.
And so he did something amazing. That's what he wanted to do, and he has a movie history before martial arts, but in terms of his martial arts films, he only has like 4 or 5, and you know he's recognized all around the earth. So his accomplishments are still valuable and important, and he's still a credible, you know, ambassador of martial arts. But he's not. I mean, come on, man. He's not walking into a room like you seen when he's like beating up 50 people. I mean, that's insane.
Embellishing a little bit,
right?
And you know what's crazy? It reminds me of when I hear things like this, Clarke. It reminds me of like so many things throughout our history that have been pretty much whitewashed or pretty much put to the back. For instance, I'll give you an example. There's a book called Black Ice about the Black Canadian players that pretty much started, you know, the
NHL.
Right. And you know, Canada is known for the best players in the world. And you do your research and you come to find out that this originally was our sport and we thrived in that sport, and it's just casually pushed to the back. And I had to tell this to my stepson that, you know, do you realize the sport of hockey is something that our people created? Rock and roll was something we created. Okay, that was a slang word. Okay, I didn't learn this till college because I went to music school. So when I hear you just bring up this from a martial arts perspective, it just makes me want to now read your articles and do my own due diligence. Right? And it's very similar to what the brother Dane Calloway is doing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dane Calloway, but Dane Calloway is somebody you definitely want to check out. Expert researcher, field researcher, and this brother's explaining that the research he's done has proven that I'll say over 80% of so-called African Americans are not even African. They're actually
they were here.
Aborigine people. So
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
the natives.
Real, like to me, listening to you give this information, you're almost like the Dane Calloway of martial arts.
Oh,
you know
okay,
what
cool.
I'm saying? To a degree. Now, let me I just wanted to ask you, like, how I know you and Cool B have a relationship, you know, from the past. So
well, me and Cool B, we went to high school together, and I think I did need martial arts. I think he saw me get beat up before. I remember I had a fight. I was like, we were like in 9th grade, man. And I fought this kid. I got off the bus and I got my ass kicked. I think he remembers that. But but any event, like even there's something important. I don't know if Cool B remembers, but we had a teacher named Mr. Ulf.
That name sounds very familiar.
He was a social studies teacher. And I mentioned him in the book because he used to provide, like, when he was reviewing history in terms of Asian history, he would introduce certain movies. And he was the first person to really turn me on to things like a movie called Empire of the Sun and a movie called The Last Emperor.
Yeah, I remember.
These things really were the initial sparks for me for Asian culture. But in terms of, me and Cool B, we went to the same high school, definitely.
Right. And it's funny, because I mentioned a little while ago that how we both ran into each other in Manhattan.
Right.
We were at 34th Street in Manhattan and Penn Station. So we were actually walking past each other. It was kind of crowded. And I kind of looked up, and you looked up, and we both looked at each other. We kept walking. I said, wait a second, is that my man, Clarke? So we both turned back around, and we looked at each other, started laughing, shook hands, like, yo, we had a brief conversation, like, yo, we have to keep in contact, yada, yada. And we've been keeping in contact on and off from that point, I believe.
And indeed. And I think that was when you either told me you went to England or you were coming back. It was around that time.
It was, the first time.
And I do remember that. I do remember that you had mentioned something, even when we bumped into each other that time, you mentioned that you were going to England. Something about England came up.
Because I think I was either getting ready to go to England, or I must have gotten back from England. But I remember, so that had to be about 2002, 2003 when I saw you. So that was like the first time I went to England, was January 2003.
Nice. Yes.
Cool. So let me ask you, Clarke, like earlier in your years, coming up, what were some of your early ambitions?
My early ambition was to sell watchtowers in the wakes. I say that jokingly, man, but I talk about this in a book, but my parents were and are still Jehovah's Witnesses, and basically when you grow up with this religion in front of you, that's what they want you to do with your life. And it's unfortunate that, the hypocrisy is they didn't grow up with that religion. And they kind of put this religion before everything else. So, my ambitions were always kind of curtailed. They were always put in the back burner because I had to put that religion first and foremost. And I waited over 30 years to drop that religion. And, I still have a relationship with my parents, but I think I should have made a better decision when I was a little bit younger, and it possibly could have helped me a lot better. But I was very fortunate, even though I was associated with one of the women at our church. She was the one who kind of introduced me to an IT school. So straight out of high school, man, my ambition, honestly, was this is gonna sound crazy, man. I was gonna get into the IT field, and I was gonna go to California so I could marry Adina Howard. That was my ambition.
the singer Adina Howard.
That was my ambition, man. I just wanted to get a job in IT, and I was gonna rent a car, and I drew a map, and I wanted to go across the United States just so I could meet her, man.
You had vision. That's good.
Very important to have vision, man.
No doubt.
So Clarke, man, I noticed your last name is Illmatical, and I just couldn't help but to ask you, does that have anything to do with Nas's first album, or?
No, actually, that word actually came from tragedy.
Oh.
And so, right,
tragedy.
Right, tragedy. And so, I made that spirit. There was a name change I actually made in 2012, and it was a spiritual decision. And this was the wake of me coming back from Brazil. And I stayed with my cousin, who was a 5%er. He is a very he still is a 5%er, and a very active member in the 5% Nation of Gods and Earth. Yeah. But
for those listeners out there, just real quick, the 5% Nation of Gods and Earth was started by a gentleman by the name of Father Allah, who used to be with the Nation of Islam, used to be under Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I just want to put that out there for all the listeners who might not know in another country. A lot of members of the Wu-Tang, Brand Nubian, various of the earlier hip hop acts, many of them were 5%ers. So just give the listeners out there just a little more context.
Indeed. And my cousin was very instrumental in helping me mentally break free from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And so it was around that time that I chose that name in reference to its symbolism and meaning. And the AL suffix is a state of being. So I took that word because I'm from Queens, second generation on both sides of my family. And that was why it was like a spiritual decision. When I heard that name in reference, I decided that was good because I had been planning on changing my name prior to that. And it was odd. I don't want to segue too much, but there was some background where I had run into another a woman from the earth, and she gave me some history on, like, you know, nations of gods and earth as well. So it wasn't something I just did randomly. It was a spiritual change, and it was something I did in 2012.
Cool, man. Man, that's dope. Cause I swore you got this name from Illmatic. You couldn't tell me you didn't get okay, but I like the way you just gave us the breakdown.
No doubt. And tragedy actually, tragedy got that from a guy called Illmatic Ice, and Illmatic Ice got that from St. Albans, Queens, because there was a group called Rapmatic.
Yeah, I heard it.
Before, like, you know, early 80s. So that name has kind of been in the atmosphere in terms of like the you know, in terms of I guess you want to say the Black vernacular within Queens.
Wow, and that probably influenced Nas. That could have even influenced Nas.
Yeah. No, definitely influenced Nas, because that my cousin actually put, you know, if you listen to Tragedy's songs on Marley Marl's album, you can hear him where he's giving the shout outs and so forth. Nas got all that stuff and he put that on Illmatic, but Tragedy was the first one to really Nas was heavily influenced by Tragedy.
By Tragedy, yes.
Right.
The same projects. Tragedy was out there before Nas, but Nas obviously became the much bigger name, household name. Now, absolutely. You said a lady at your church was the one who pretty much told you to start to travel. So my question is, what was the first place you traveled to abroad, and why did you choose that place?
Okay, well, the first place I traveled abroad was Brazil. And that was sparked, honestly, by this movie called The City of God.
Yes, one of my favorites.
I saw that movie in 2003, and I remember back then there was like this real cryptic ad for it on Hot 97. It was the RZA. I was like, what is this guy talking about? Now I dismissed it, and like one day I think I didn't have anything to do, so I checked out on cable, and I was just hypnotized. I had never been overwhelmed by like a film like that ever.
Yeah.
And that's weird you say The City of Gods made you go to Brazil, because I thought it would do the opposite. I thought it would make
you not want to go there.
Not go to Brazil.
No. When I was in when I first got in the IT field, one of the guys we went to school with, there was a guy, I don't want to say his full name, I'll just say his name was Martin. I don't want to say his last name. So me and my boy, we moved out to Atlanta, and we were both working for Bell South, and we were working in this place called the Network Operations Center. And I remember Martin was still in New York, but he was traveling to Brazil, and he was sending my homeboy pics of like the women he was dealing with. And you know, that wasn't a big, I mean, I had like my little shorty at like Spelman. It's not, I wasn't about to travel for some pussy.
Right.
And it was like, all right, man, that's not a big deal for me. That's not a deal breaker. But when over the years, after I saw that movie, and I don't know if I had heard Portuguese before, but I had just never been overwhelmed by like a piece of art like that. And I was hypnotized. I had to go there.
So here's the thing, being that you've lived in Brazil, do you speak Portuguese, and how long were you down in Brazil for?
Yeah, I was there 6 months, and I speak like, I was speaking at a level where I was functional. And so what that means is, I'll just share, like, I'll give you some insight. There was a guy, his blog is still online. It's called Eyes on Brazil, for anybody who's still interested in going. And he made a good point. He says, listen, the bad thing about the Brazilian visa is 6 months, like you 3 months visa, and then you extend it for another 3 months. But he said, by the time you're finished with 6 months, you're just getting a hold of the language, and then you got to leave. And there's ways around that, but it's just kind of like that's when you make all your friends, you're getting your feet wet, you get a little bit settled, and by that time you have to leave. So when I say functional use of the language, and I talk about this in the book, you don't learn everything. You don't learn the entire language because that could take you, like 4 or 5 years. You want to get to a point, there's something called like emergency or survival language.
Right.
And so what you want to do is you want to learn the basics, how to introduce yourself, how to count, how to ask basic questions, who, what, when, where, why.
Yeah.
How to count, how to ask for help, and maybe give somebody a phone number, tell people where you live. That's gonna be your starting point. Introduce yourself, say hello to people. That's the baseline. Tell time. After that, you can get into like, every week add on like 20 more questions and things like that. But you want to just get the basics down first.
Great, man. That's a great way to kind of break it down, man. So let me ask you this. What are some of the downsides to, traveling abroad over a long period of time? Give us some of the downsides.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest downsides is, being away from your people, in a sense. You brought up, the discussion about quote unquote African Americans and the majority of them being indigenous. The thing is, a lot of this have a spiritual connection to this land that goes back, thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, what I noticed about the African brothers when I was living in Asia, even if they were married, in China, they usually went home every 6 or 3 months. Every 6 months they went home to recalibrate, and then they would come back. Whereas I was out there for 4.5 years, and I kind of feel like I was, wasn't spiritually balanced at times. So I think that when you're out traveling by yourself for a long time and moving around, it's difficult to, I'm used to it now, but it can be difficult to make real friends, find a social circle, and and find community. Those are the biggest obstacles for anybody who travels, regardless of color. Finding community, friends, a spiritual base, and just finding, like, you may have a direction, but even just getting the right fit, because not every country and city is going to be a right fit for you.
I definitely agree with that. And the reason why I say that is because I'm actually looking to move abroad as well. And within the next, I'll say 4 or 5 years. And that's one of the biggest things that, me and my fiance are looking at is like, okay, there's so many choices here, but what is really going to feel like home to us? So when we do our trip overseas, we're looking at Belize right now. We'll be moving around to at least 3 to 4 different places and staying in those regions, and we're just going to let our intuition talk to us. And I just feel a lot of things will there's something greater that tells you this is where it's at.
Indeed.
And it's kind of like, me growing up in the Caribbean, moving to New York, but in 2015 there was something inside of me that said you have to leave, and Atlanta was the place that I chose to go. And since then, I've struggled. I went through a lot of different things. Had to overcome a lot of things, but now I'm in a very great space.
Nice.
So, I just love hearing stories like this.
Yeah, definitely, man. So
okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was gonna say the same for me, being that I left New York in 2011 and came to LA. It was a struggle, but things definitely, worked out for the best.
Now, I wanted to add on. See, we're talking about travel, but in the book, I point out the most significant travel experience that I had initially was in the United States, and so because there's a lot of brothers and sisters, but this book is aimed at brothers, like, and I think both of you had mentioned, like, when you were abroad, like, you had a network that you tapped into. so many of us have like relatives down south. So many of us got that uncle in Alaska or Hawaii.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with giving these people a ring and say, hey, look, I want to come stay out there for 6 months. You don't have to pay my bills, just help me get set up.
Right.
Things like that, being reasonable. And so using that network, because my brother had a house in Atlanta, and that was what allowed me to go there and be there and function.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm glad you said that. Networking. Me and Cool learned this very early on in our travels. The first time we went to London, England, we were able to stay without staying in a hotel, paying for hotels, Airbnbs. We actually had connections out there, just like you had a brother there. We had cousins, family members, uncles within these regions, and it literally helped us so much with the budget. It helped us to have a local experience as opposed to the touristy experience.
Yes,
and it was great. Shout outs to Ed.
My cousin.
He really held us down out there. Peter, all those guys. I have a cousin by the name of Jasmine that I was introduced to for the first time. We went to England in 2003, and it was crazy. I remember the first time I met her. Her mother is pretty much my grandfather's little sister. I've never met her before. She actually just turned 90. I think she just turned 92.
Oh, wow.
Blessing. And shout outs to Aunt Elsie. And I met them for the first time. And it was so crazy to say that I had never met them before. We got so tight that she actually gave me, I remember her giving me this envelope. And I never bothered to open the envelope till I got back to New York. And she put like 100 pounds.
Nice.
Which was almost $200 at the time.
Yeah.
And took me around, and it was like she knew me for our whole life. So I definitely see the importance of connecting with somebody that's already on the ground. Just like Belize, Cool B's brother is in Belize.
Oh, nice. So you're good to go, man.
Yeah.
Right. So we already have a foundation on the ground, boots on the ground, that can say, look, this area is good for this, but this area is good for that.
Right.
So that's definitely important. So I want to move forward now. I want to really get into the book.
Yes.
The book really has me interested. It's titled Homeboy in the Pyramids, and this is the title of the show as well. And you said this is a travel guide for so-called Black men. Now I want to ask you, why do you say so-called Black?
I'll get into it. And you mentioned Dame Calloway and his research with African Americans.
Right.
Coming out of the Jehovah's Witness cults, I'm very conscious of the words I use. And when I was in China, Chinese people just called me African. They just called me African. They didn't call me Black very rarely. Usually I find with Asian people, when they would call you Black, they're getting influence from Caucasians.
Yep.
So usually, like if you're in China, they're just fake Warren, you're African. And so I was doing research. I had a color theory course that I was studying online. I did a lot of self-study when I was in China. And this professor mentioned, and I mentioned this in the book, he mentioned that universally within the world, those words, white and Black, are not processed the same. And so basically, Black in every language in this earth, on the planet, it has a negative connotation, whereas white has a spiritual connotation, or it's, for righteousness and goodness. So,
or purity.
And I don't want to subscribe to that. I understand, I appreciate quote unquote American Black culture. But at the same time, I want to get away from that word, and we can call each other what we want. The most damaging thing is calling Europeans or Caucasians white.
That's right. I'm going to interject real quick, because as I understand it through my research, the word Black is just a status, and it's just a lower status.
Yeah.
And by calling somebody, and a lot of people don't understand that people from Egypt are considered white.
Right. Status, exactly.
Has nothing to do with race.
Right.
And we sit up here, we post, and we claim Black Lives Matter, and we keep claiming these things that don't belong to us. We allow people to name us what they want to name us. For 1 minute, we were Negro, but it was a time we were Aborigine, we were Indigenous. Then we became Afro-American. Then we became Black. Then we became African-American. And this, to me, is very dangerous when somebody can change your name right in front of your face and you not challenge it and even give you your history and or their version of history and impose it upon you. And then when you try to educate people on this, they're so indoctrinated, right? Because as I learned through Dane Calloway recently, they used to have something called freedmen schools, but freedmen schools were not schools. They were religious institutions designed for indoctrination.
Wow. Brainwashing.
So the very religious sector was actually directly responsible for us adopting the mindset that we actually still hold today.
Sure.
So as Dane Calloway explains, racism had nothing to do with chains and shackles. There was no chains and shackles involved. And most of the slaves were actually children. Okay.
That's deep. I didn't know that.
Yep. And a lot of what we call slavery was nothing but sharecroppers who were signing up these deals pretty much with Europeans to work land. And if they couldn't keep up with the payments or the crops didn't come in, eventually they'll owe those people. And then what happened, they would do something called a land grab. And that's how the indigenous people started to lose their land to foreign corporations such as banks and the international bankers who now pretty much control this company through, this company, which is called the United States federal government, which is incorporated in Delaware. So a lot of people don't understand that corporations actually control you. The police work for the city, aka Corp, which is also a lower corporation owned by a municipality known as a county. The county. Okay, then you have county, you have state, and then that state is actually a corporation too. And then you have a separate corporation called the federal government. And the federal government has a management company called the GSA. It is managed. So we are literally controlled by corporations, but you don't see nobody fighting, pumping their hands like at the corporate.
Not at all. Not at all.
Nobody says nothing.
No.
So just wanted to, not to go on a rant, but I just wanted to go into that. Now, let me ask you a question. How long did it take for you to put this book together?
When I got back from Asia, and the way that things went, because I mentioned, I sent like a synopsis. I went out to Asia. There was some events that prompted that journey, but I went out there and I was there for 4.5 years. And during the time that I wanted to, the time when I was out there, I went to Hong Kong and I was overwhelmed by Hong Kong. And it really became my focus. I said, I'm gonna live here, I'm gonna make it here. And I wound up getting there. And then I'm there for 6 months. I get into this stupid argument that turns into a street fight. I break someone's eye socket, and then I wind up doing 6 months in prison.
Wow.
I get deported.
Locked up abroad.
Well, see, and I learned a lot in that process. And I'll be honest with you, that was the most important part of my time in Asia.
Wow.
But so I get back, I'm gonna just answer your question. So I get back and my girlfriend at the time and one of my friends was like, bro, this shit is like a movie. You gotta write this. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. That's what segued into that.
Yeah, because I was thinking about Locked Up Abroad. Like when you said that, I'm like, you could
it's crazy.
Locked Up Abroad. That was one of my
favorites. Oh yeah, I've been contacted by several people and different Vice magazine and so forth. All right.
Nice. Vice. Shout out to Vice, man.
Yeah, I like Vice. Definitely Vice. A friend to S.I.N Radio.
Nice. Okay. All right.
Love Vice, man. So so since you've traveled abroad and you've been out of the country for years at a time, did you notice any changes when you came back to your home nation?
That's a very important point. I talk about this in the book, The Return Home. And whenever you come back, if you leave the United States for a significant amount of time, when you come back, you're going to see things differently. And I mentioned I just published an article on my blog about this, but I mentioned like, everyone is still brilliant and amazing, but you see the world a lot different.
Right.
And so nothing is diminished. Like New York City I still love New York City, but I've seen Hong Kong, I've seen Rio de Janeiro, I've seen Beijing. So it's like, this isn't all I know. This is still like one of the best cities in the world. Don't get it twisted. But you grow, and I'll share something. A brother told me something very deep, and I'm still in contact with him. He's in Bahia. He said, look, I was like, I had a week left in Brazil. I was going to go back home, and we talked. He said, listen, when you go back, people are going to hate on you. And as soon as I got back, funny style cousins and some people, not the one I built with in the 5% Nation, but some other people was acting funny, So you learn, you see things a lot. You interpret everything that you know differently.
So I have a question for you. Being that you lived in several places, and you said you speak a little bit of Portuguese. Are there other languages that you learned to speak while living in these other places?
Yeah, so like when I was in Brazil, I had to learn like functional Portuguese.
Right.
Before I even left to go to Beijing, I started with Mandarin. I learned Cantonese when I was in Hong Kong. When I was in Cambodia, I learned basic. When I was in Vietnam, was probably the only place I didn't learn any of the language because it was my fault. The material I had, the language learning material I had was based on a northern dialect. I was in Ho Chi Minh City for like 7-8 months. And the books that I had were all based on the dialect from Hanoi. I wound up going to Hanoi for 2 months, but basically I didn't learn any Vietnamese at all. But every other part of the journey, I would always learn basics, counting and so forth. Yeah. And in Taiwan, they speak Mandarin. So the little bit of, and even I remember when I was in Taiwan, they knew that I had been living in Beijing because they could hear it in my accent.
Okay, that's crazy. They can sense the differences and stuff.
Because people in Beijing, they got this, like, it's like a New York accent, but in Mandarin. And it's very, very harsh. And it's
cool.
very...
I would never thought that, but yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you, so you've lived in Brazil, China, Taiwan, Cambodia, Vietnam, Hong Kong, and Tanzania. So that's a lot of places.
Right.
Let me just ask you, between, the fellas, what places do you think the girls had the best vajayjay? Like
Asia.
What was the freaks at, man?
Asia.
All the fellas out there.
Asia. The women in like Vietnam, like Asian women, they have tighter pussy.
Really?
I'm not even holding nothing, but listen.
Really?
I had,
fellas, trigger alert. Trigger alert.
Listen, I'm telling you, listen, you get the right Asian woman, forget UFC, you will be tapping out.
Wow. Well, there you go, fellas.
Best pussy I've had was like, this girlfriend, Bahamas. She was all, but like a lot of Asian women, their pussies are tighter, and that's why, like, sometimes you ever see like a big dude, his wife is like half his size.
Yeah, I've seen.
That's because her pussy game is. I'm telling you, man, a lot of women got their pussy game on lock.
God damn! So, I would have swore. Hold up, I would have swore Brazil. I thought he was gonna say Brazil, man.
Really?
I was not expecting.
I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Like, I don't even like Brazilian women. They're whack. They can't dress. Their hair's all fucked up. A lot of the Brazilian chicks now, they can fuck, but like, and like they try to bring it to you. They got the ass game, but like I'm not really into Brazilian women.
Clarke, are you serious?
Yeah, man, you know what it is, man? Brazilian women, they cannot dress. And listen, you it's like their style is like lame, bro, and they don't know how to do their hair properly. I'm not into them at all.
You about to get canceled.
Man, they're gonna cancel you, Clarke.
listen, I live there. Listen,
question, right?
Brother, yeah, go ahead.
No, not to go on, but I know you into martial arts.
Yeah.
Did you ever get into the Brazilian art forms like the what was it,
Capoeira?
Yes.
So, well, capoeira, I talk about this in my book. Like capoeira, when I got into it, I was trying to learn how to dance. And when I went to some of these like opens here in New York City, capoeira is more for fighting. But I learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I went to Rio. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is probably like the most rewarding martial art I had ever learned, because, you know, it's something like you learn it and you don't have to spend several weeks to get a return on investment. You're in there for several months and you can know how to take someone's life very easily. So all you have to do is apply yourself. I think, and I mentioned this in the book, I recommended all quote unquote Black men study Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
So how long did it take you to actually pick up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Oh, so like I was in Vidigal, which is a favela, and I didn't speak Portuguese at an academic level. Right. And I was fortunate that there was a guy in class who spoke some broken English. Mm-hmm. So the first few weeks I was in there, I didn't really get the understanding of how to roll and so forth. So like I was coming in with like a street wrestling attitude, and they were just choking the shit out of me. I passed out a few times, but it was good. But I have to say, like, maybe like 3 months before I felt comfortable working through stuff. And I think that's one of the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like, because my entire life, like if I had a street fight and somebody's grappling with me, I'm getting tense. Yeah. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teaches you to work under pressure. And not only, because when I was in Taiwan, I had somebody try to kill me. This guy was trying to choke me out in the middle of the street, and I had used some traditional martial arts, but the bottom line was he was trying to choke me. He was like, he had a bad headlock. So traditional martial arts, they teach you to put your hand over your nose. So as long as you can still breathe, somebody can choke you all you want, but you can still breathe. Oh, wow. So, but being in Brazil, he was doing this for like a minute or two, and he was sweating. And I'm up there, I'm relaxed. And I was like, man, as soon as I get in, I'm gonna knock this guy, man. I broke free, man. I lit that guy up so badly. That was like the worst I'd ever beat anyone.
Damn, dude.
His face was leaking, man.
I want to ask you what caused that whole situation, but
no, that wasn't me. He in Taiwan, I mentioned this in the book, he was high off of betel nut. In Taiwan, there's this stimulant called betel nut. Yeah. I know it sounds crazy. So if you Google
that like betel nut?
No, not like a betel. It's called betel nut. It's a stimulant that's kind of like cocaine or marijuana, and they use it to get high. And it's prevalent in like Asia, but especially in Taiwan. And so it's legal. And I was buying something in a store, and I just bumped into this guy, and he reeked of alcohol and betel nut. And he was fucking, his eyes were all red. And so I left the store, and I'm walking down the street, and I hear somebody yelling. I turn around, he just runs up to me and puts me in a headlock.
Wow.
So I want to touch on some things in the book now.
Yeah.
Now, you spoke on being broken by a female.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
That was an important part of my life because I had just gotten away from the Jehovah's Witness religion. I had broken up like one of my best girlfriends. She was a Dominican young lady from Dominican Republic. Oh. And so I'm in this period where like, I'm not involved. I'm spiritually unbalanced. And so I run into this brick wall. And I remember the first day I went out with her, I turned the corner, man. And like, I don't know if you remember those old Spider-Man comics where he had the Spidey sense going off. Like, I knew something was wrong then. But long story short, I get involved with this girl, I'm fucking her brains out for 7 months or whatever. And she got rid of me. She tossed me, she got rid of me. She discarded me. And, I couldn't understand what happened. I was used to, I don't know, guess fucking women in submission or just having them be cool with me or whatever. But she's like, nah, nigga, get the fuck away from me. And I was like, what did I do? So, I was looking for answers. And I mentioned this in the book. The first man to come to me and help me was Tariq Nasheed.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys know who Tariq is.
Oh,
but
we know who he is.
Man. That's
we
my
know
dog,
who he is. Yeah.
There's this thing called the Red Pill community, but Tariq had these things called the Mac lessons.
I got the book. I know it.
And I remember when I started hearing these Mac lessons, he was breaking down all these lies that women would tell. And I was like, whoa, that happened to me. That happened to me too.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And then he started talking about a word called simp. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. So, I had been conditioned. And so now I was still kind of hurt. And another thing that happened was I had interviewed this brother in a martial arts article, and his name is Floyd Webb. He's got a documentary coming out about traditional martial arts as well. He's from Chicago. He's 65 right now, but he was and is my mentor. But he was breaking down the whole scenario. I talked to him on the phone. He broke down the whole situation, and he was just telling me, this woman was trying to hurt me because her boyfriend hurt her, or somebody had hurt her. And I get into a little bit more detail about what happened was. But he's like, by the way, you need to change. You told me you taught in Brazil. My nephew's out in China. And he put me in contact with his nephew. And I thought, sometimes people will bullshit you.
Right.
And he's like, you should come out here, man, because the school I'm at, they need somebody. You could work half the day. They'll pay you a salary. And then 4 or 5 days later, man, they sent me a plane ticket.
Wow. That's major.
Man.
And then when I get to Beijing, they rescinded the offer.
What?
Wow.
So that set the journey off there. Yeah.
So
it's crazy.
For all the people out there that are not familiar with the Red Pill community, a lot of brothers tend to go to the Red Pill community online. There's a very big presence online. And one of our favorite brothers from the Red Pill community, we did a show on, Kevin Samuels.
Yep.
The big dog right now at the moment. We got Minister Jap. We got brothers like O'Shea Duke Jackson and Mediocre Tutorial and Reviews. Salute to those brothers. And these are the brothers that a lot of brothers go to when they are hurt in a relationship and need answers and clarity for them to continue on pursuing their purpose.
Straight answers.
And let me tell you, Cool B was the one who introduced me to Tariq Nasheed. And one of the first books I actually bought from Tariq Nasheed was a book called The Mac Within.
Indeed.
Okay. And that book really opened me up to a lot of things. But the book that really, really took me to another level was a book called How to Become an Alpha Male. I forget the brother's name. It's a white guy, but I forget his name. Something Alexander. I read that book and I felt that was probably the most thorough book for men looking to improve themselves. Right. And it was at that point of reading that book that I realized that I was an alpha male. I realized there were things that I didn't even realize it. I had a certain at the age of 15, prior to 15, I had a very low self-esteem. But at the age of 15, something just turned on me in me.
And that book, not to cut you off, is by Alexander John.
Any brother that's, and it doesn't matter what race, you could be a brother, you could be Asian, whatever, Latin,
you could be white, anybody. Yeah.
Anybody. That book to me is a book that everybody should read because he talks about not just about, how to talk to women. It's more or less the mindset, the internal locus, as opposed to the external locus.
Sure.
Meaning things change from within you.
Yes.
Not from the outside.
Indeed,
okay.
Indeed.
Change is an internal. And what you see externally is a byproduct of what's happening internal.
Sure.
So it's dope that you were able to tap into that source and find some answers and then continue on with your purpose. Very important. That's something we try to teach on this platform is how you know, for our listeners to become a better version of themselves,
right,
by using data, and then not just taking the data, but applying it, because knowledge is one thing, but applying the knowledge is a totally different
right.
thing.
Indeed,
It doesn't make any sense to sit on knowledge and not apply it.
indeed.
Might as well not have it.
Absolutely, man. So anything else from this book you would like to share? Like what was I got a good question. What was the most difficult chapter to write in this book? What was the most difficult chapter to write?
I think the chapters where I'm reflecting on, making changes in my late 20s, leaving corporate America and then gradually leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. That was a lot to me, and it was a difficult process because I had to, lose. There were certain people that I had to, break connection with, and people I've known my entire life. I had to dissolve those relationships,
Right.
and that because of that religion, and that was kind of painful. But I think reflecting on any negative periods, because you got to understand, during the course of these years, I've been homeless twice.
Wow.
I've that's why, like, my friend was like, your life is like a movie. It's not. And you mentioned the purpose of the overall purpose and arc was in about 2006. I tried to write the sequel for The Last Dragon.
Oh, wow.
And so what happened was I met with the writer and creator of that movie, and he kind of set me on another journey. And that was another reason why I went to Asia, because I had been working on a fantasy fiction novel based on martial arts and so forth. And so I needed to go to China and experience Asian culture, because there were things that I needed to experience firsthand. And so, like you mentioned, purpose, I definitely advocate that brothers travel with a purpose. That should be the focal point of the traveling. But in terms of like any negative or difficult, there wasn't anything overall difficult. I think it's been cathartic, because like I wanted to just kind of revisit a lot of stuff, and just it's an emotional release. So it's not, I guess, at any time I'm like reflecting on my down periods, but I even talk about getting therapy. I got therapy online, and a lot of people walk around with pain and shit. And it's just like, man, speak to somebody.
I think a lot of people are too prideful. And I know a lot of situations where, within the Black community, especially, is like, if you go to therapy, you're crazy. But it's like, if you don't go to therapy, you're crazy, because you keep things bottled up, and you like, and especially for a lot of Black men, it's like, well, I'm a man. I can just brush it off. I can just go through it without any help I'm like, life doesn't work like that. Everybody needs help, and everybody needs somebody that you can speak to kind of work through your problems.
Go ahead.
I think at least 85 to 90% of our community needs therapy.
Indeed.
And it's really serious. And we kind of downplay it. We look at that as being crazy or something is wrong with us. But to say that our people have gone through the things that they've gone through, how could you not need therapy?
Sure. Exactly.
To me, it's just asking to think that you're going through police brutality, you're going through violence within your own community, you're going through situations with single motherhood, not being raised primarily around both parents, the breakdown of the family nucleus, and people really don't think they need therapy. And that to me is just asinine when you really think about it. Because when you see people posting about situations involving the mistreatment of our people, the indigenous people, Niji of this continent, they speak from a very emotional perspective. And there's nothing wrong with having emotions, but when a person's not in control of their emotions or energy in motion, bad things tend to happen.
Right. No, absolutely.
And I feel like it's definitely a time for us to seriously consider, as a collective, that if we're going to get things fixed around here, we have to start with ourselves internally, purge a lot of the things that are holding us up, the blockages, the things, the energy that is no longer serving us. Go inward, and we will see a definite change for the better in the external realm.
Absolutely. You know, I talk about this in book. One of the brothers who helped me get set up in where I was at in Rio, he's a gay brother, and he was having a hard time coming out. And he was going through all this torture. And he was like, you know, he was fucked up, man. You know, he was fucked up. And like for a while, like you know, he lived in another part of the favela, and I was like, you know, I would go see him, and he's crying and shit. I'm like, yo, what's going on with you, bro? And he just broke down and told me one day, you know, I'm an adult because one of my cousins is gay, so it didn't really like I wasn't tripping. It was like, bro, you need, and I told him like, your parents love you, bro. Don't worry about that shit. But he went through a lot of stuff, and in the book I talk about, like, you know, encouraging brothers, whatever the situation is, get help, because years ago when we had communities, you could possibly go to the, you know, the barbershop, and that old elder would be there. And even if you went to the bar, you might run into the reverend or somebody from the church who was that sagacious person who could give you insight.
Right.
But a lot of that stuff is gone. And so you don't smoking, you know, how much weed you're smoking, but it should be something that's continuous. It's not about being weak. It's about working through your problems. And there's people there who are trained for that. So that's what.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And you said something about weed, and I, you know, just something just sparked in my head. And I feel like a lot of brothers are using the weed as the therapy.
Right. That's
yeah.
Even I like Tariq, but he used to say shit like, you know, when you hurt, go get a drink. He said the old players would say, go get a drink. And I think that you don't need to go get, look, I like alcohol. I like a little bit, I like having a beer. I like having some weed.
Here and there, right.
That's not how you're going to work through that problem.
Right. No, it's not. It's actually going to create
more problems. Yeah.
And that's what I notice about our people is that we get so comfortable within those things, pastimes such as drinking, and we're just covering up and just muddying up what's already there. Okay, and we just kind of compound.
Right. And that becomes like a norm, and that goes into your regular routine, man. And I think that we need healthier outlets and people that are willing to listen and to help you work through your problems. And I just think that now more so than ever, so many people just feel like they don't really have the time, and there's not too many mentoring programs and things of that nature that we can actually go to.
I want to add something because I'm glad you just said mentoring, and I had a mentor. That was the best thing that happened to me. My mentor, LeBron Johnson, he really helped me out, and I feel that that's somewhere we need to go with this. Is we need to get back into the mentoring aspect of things, and I look at Homeboy and the Pyramids as almost somewhat of a de facto mentor.
No, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned in the book. I do mention that I've been mentored, and I've had people constantly mentored, but also I ask brothers that are out there, because there's brothers out there who are sitting on all types of information.
Right.
And I want to just say, look, if they read the book, start helping people, man, because there's brothers out there who have, like, you know, and there's brothers out there. There's some brother out there who made his own goddamn submarine and not telling nobody, and you know I'm exaggerating, but
I get it.
Brothers out there doing amazing things within travel or just doing things within life, and they're sitting on information and they're not passing on that information, and that mentoring has to go.
I would not to cut you off. I say the youth need to hear these things, because the thing is that when you don't see somebody like you doing great things, you're gonna always hear things from other people. Oh, well, you don't have black people doing this. You don't have black people doing that. Why don't you just pick up a basketball? I'm like, look, picking up a basketball is not a bad thing. But at the end of the day, it's like you have a lot of athletes who are not just athletes. These guys are having business or have businesses outside of that. You know, but it's not one of those things where, you know, it's that prevalent where people who are in a higher position or a higher status will come down to really mentor people and to put them in programs and things like that. And I think we need more of these things around.
Definitely.
And do you think do you think that Homeboy and the Pyramids could lead to something like maybe a non-for-profit or something, or where guys get to meet up and do like a retreat? Do you want it to evolve into something beyond the book?
Like I said, I'm just continuing a conversation. Like you and Cool B mentioned that you had a show about travel, the Freshman's Guide to Travel.
Freshman's Guide to Travel, yes.
Right. And I'm just, years ago, there was a book, and African Americans published a book called The Green Book, and it was a travel book just within safe places to go within the United States. To go to this restaurant, don't go to this city. It was that kind of information. And I made this book because we cannot travel in the wake of Caucasians, and we cannot travel in the wake of women. Sister's gonna go to some city and everybody's gonna be nice to her because they want to fuck her. And you be like, yeah, they love Black people here. They don't love Black people, they want to fuck her. And so, you follow her and you're gonna get out, you're gonna be like, what the fuck? So it's like, we need to have our own dialogue with each other.
Right.
And then, with each other, and it's not hindering anybody. It's like there's certain to hurt each other. So I think that there are brothers who are gonna have, there's something called the Black Travel Movement that a brother has started, and that thing is getting huge, man. And so I'm not in competition with anybody. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be plenty of Black men travel books, and I'm all for it. Like I said, this is just my part of my life and my story. And like I said, in the intro of the book, I wish somebody would have given me this information when I was 40, because I'm 44 now. I wish somebody would have given me this book 4 years ago. I wish somebody would have given me this book when I was 20. And like I said, there was a time, man, when I was like lost and hurt. And, Tariq was one of the brothers who came to me, but there was a time when I wasn't getting any kind of spiritual or intellectual direction in life at all.
Right. That's facts.
We're in the age of Aquarius now, man. So information is a lot more readily available. You have meetups now. You have so many things that brothers can now link up with like-minded individuals. And that's why I've always wanted to do a retreat with, it doesn't have to be big, but at least 8 to 10 brothers.
Oh, absolutely.
Start off and bring them into the loop, because I know there's a lot of traumas, because as men, we don't get the benefit of the doubt.
No, never.
We're taught to just tough it out, produce and keep your emotions in check. And sometimes we need that outlet to go to voice amongst our peers.
Absolutely.
And a place of, a place that we consider sacred, that we can share things that we would not share with the rest of the world. And I believe that is the missing aspect of this thing, as far as improving our people experience on this continent, is to really get the men back in focus, because the men are the leaders. And when the leadership is compromised,
it crumbles.
Today.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, man, I want you to put out your social media. You got a website. Where can people expect this book? Where can they go to? Can they go to Amazon? Do you have a site? Just put that out there.
Definitely. Thank you very much, guys. And so it's homeboyinthepyramids.com. They can look for the book on Amazon probably around June. I think I'm gonna hit publish in June. I just finished the first draft a few weeks ago. But I'm on work and finished cleaning up a few things, and I'm gonna hire another graphic designer to clean up the some of the fonts on the cover. But I already paid for the illustration that you see. I think I sent you a picture of the book cover.
Yes.
I had a brilliant artist named Ed Watson do the illustration. So I just want to work on the font, maybe changing some of that. But other than that, it's gonna be available for like a Kindle as a late May, early June.
Okay. Also
supporting that.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know before the book, right before the book drops, so we can help promote your book on our platforms.
Absolutely.
And we'll definitely push that book, and I definitely will be purchasing a copy, and I know Mercy's going to purchase his own copy. So we're gonna definitely support you, man, because I've known you.
All right, I appreciate you guys. All right,
brother, man, and you know,
thank you very much
and sharing your story.
I appreciate it.
And your story might not sound like a big deal to you, but to somebody out there, your story is a big deal. And just talking to you and learning about the martial arts aspect, that just to me opened another chapter, because now I'm wanting to look into this whole thing, because I'm already looking at Dane Calloway, I'm looking at the Tariq Nasheeds, I'm looking at all this information that is suddenly, coming available, right, and it's starting to germinate. And I'm we really had this shit on Smash, and somebody did a great job of trying to bury it.
Yeah, there you go. That's what it is, man.
Hey, man, it's amazing with a shovel. So, man, any last words, man?
Yo, I just want to say thank you to Cool V. Thank you, Mercy. Thank you guys for having me on. And I just want to give a shout out. And the book is dedicated to Bakari Henderson. He's a brother who went to Greece and he was killed. He got into a fight and he was jumped by some men and they killed his brother.
Yeah, I heard about
that. Such a sad thing. His brother was just a nice, good looking young brother, like 20 years old, 21, just finishing college, man. So I still want brothers to travel, and this is why we need to have these conversations, so we know what's going on in certain places, and we keep ourselves safe.
Absolutely, man. Yo, man, I really enjoyed this one right here, man. This was
same here, brother.
It was just so educational, man, and you just showed me there's a lot more dimensions to a person, and you should never judge anyone just looking at them just off a basic look. You really want to just chop it up with a person and see, because everyone is a multi-dimensional being.
Okay, absolutely.
And sometimes we only look at one aspect of a person and we never really get to the other part. So
indeed, absolutely,
man. So man, thank you.
Thank
Clarke,
you guys. Appreciate you.
Clarke, man.
Definitely got to touch down with us again, man. And
I think so. I think it'll happen.
Want to go into the martial arts stuff, because you really got me excited with that.
That's gonna be a whole nother show, and that's gonna be big this summer. It's gonna be big, because I'm seeing on some stuff that nobody's seen.
Oh man. Wow! Please bring it to S.I.N Radio Cast, man. For sure.
Bring that over here. We want to be first dibs on that.
All right, no problem. No problem.
And shout outs to all the listeners out there. Episode number 17 is probably one of the best ones we've done. Thank you for coming on, sharing your knowledge, and go out and get that book, Homeboy and the Pyramids by Clarke Illmatical.
It sounds so much better when you say it.
Yeah. Cool B, Mr. Mercy, signing off, S.I.N Radio Cast. Check us out till next time.
Peace.
Peace.